Good morning, grade 7s. This morning we're going to talk about listening skills. Now, we talk a lot about comprehension skills, and I know you're quite familiar with that. But what's equally important in any conversation is that you listen when other people speak to you. I want you to, firstly, before we start discussing this, to go to your textbook to page 98. It says Classroom Activity 1, Formal Assessment Task. Just get there, please, so we can start discussing it. Right, now that you're ready, let's continue. Now, on page 98, they refer to listening skills specifically while you're watching a news report. In other words, at night when you watch 8 o'clock news or the 11 o'clock news or whatever on television, for instance, your listening skills are quite important. In other words, after you've listened to these bits of news that someone broadcasted to all of us, you need to be able to tell someone else what you've just heard. Equally important in a conversation. We often see people talking to one another, and then when you ask someone, what did the other person say, they can't remember because they only know what they said. To listen is as important as it is to speak. Now, on page 98, they want you to listen to a news report on television, which is what I want you to do as soon as you possibly can, tonight if you could possibly do that, or tomorrow evening. You are allowed to have notes with you, in other words, a piece of paper and a pencil if you want to make a few notes, but I would advise against it because I want you to listen to what's being said, watch the news bulletin, and afterwards look at the questions on page 98 and then try and answer them. You could have someone in your family ask you these questions and then you verbalize it to them. In other words, you tell them what you've heard. I want you to answer questions 1 to 7, still on page 98, after you have watched this news bulletin on television. I'm going to go through the questions with you quickly. Question 1 says, briefly summarize what the main news story of the day is about. Now, people, when you listen to any specific news bulletin, especially at night at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock or whenever, there will be one story that stands out. It's the most important story of the day. Usually the first one, but it doesn't have to be necessarily. But you will know which one was the main news story of the day. So write that down or tell that to a family member, please. Question number 2. How many items of national news have been presented on the television broadcast? List the items and say briefly what they are about. National news mean news that are of concern to us as a nation. What did they say that's important to us as a nation? Make a list. In these days we live in now, there are many things said every night during the television broadcast that are very important to us as South Africans. Number 3. Are there any items of international news? If so, who was involved and what happened? Okay. Focus on the word international news here. We want to know, what did they say during this news bulletin that happened internationally, in Sudan, in America, in China? Write that down. Number 4. Did you learn anything that happened in your local community? Now, we're not talking the national news. We're not talking international news. We're talking local. What happened in the Vaal Triangle? What happened in Gauteng? What happened in Johannesburg? That's what you want to write down here. 5. What financial information is given in this news report? In other words, it has to do with money. My money, your parents' money. What did they say that's important to us and to our money? Number 6. What is the weather forecast for your particular region? Again, we want detail. Minimum temperatures, maximum temperatures. Is it going to rain? Is it going to snow? That kind of detail. And number 7, the last question you have to answer is, which news item affects you the most? Explain why this is so. This is worth 4 marks, and there's a good reason for that, people, because this is all about what that specific bit of news did to you emotionally. We can all watch the same news bulletin, but there will be that little something at that news bulletin that will affect my little heart and will be really important to me, but it won't be that important to someone else. I want you to mention that. What really hit home to you? What was emotionally important to you in that news bulletin? Please ask one of your family members to ask you these questions afterwards. Try and answer them as honestly as you possibly can. Give yourself a mark. The mark allocation is clearly indicated there on page 98. And have good fun doing so. Goodbye.